Disclaimer: there will be plenty of blasphemy, satire, and outright mockery. Do not watch if you're worried you'll get offended. As you probably know, Prophet Muhammad is revered by Muslims all over the world. He is the final messenger from Allah and the perfect example of how a man should be. As such, Muslims are taught to follow in his footsteps, sometimes literally, like using the same foot to enter the washroom, and use him as a moral guide, while every other source of morality is regarded as secondary and imperfect. In this Ramadan series, I will go over situations in Muhammad's life to see how he handled them and what lessons we can learn from him. Don't forget to interact with this video if you'd like to see more. Prophet Muhammad was a married man. In fact, he had a whole harem of wives. This website called Islam Online attempts to justify it by first quoting the Quran. Quoting the Bible. Pretty damn ironic that a lot of apologetics in Islam boil down to, well, other people did it too. In fact, they say that it is accepted that Sulaiman collected wives as gifts from lesser kings. Islam is just one patriarchal circle jerk, isn't it? Men together strong. So yeah, polygamy is allowed, whatever. But the fact that Muhammad married a dozen women is not the focus of today's video. I will focus on how he treated them, because we're often told that he was the best husband and that if you're going to marry multiple women, you have to be fair to all of them. That's why he did round sleeping with his wives in one day without a shower. Ew, gross. And he gave each of them one night per week to spend with him. Remember these two takeaways. Be fair to your wives and spend an equal amount of time with each one. And take a shower. No favoritism. So what will we learn from Muhammad today? Favoritism. If you don't already know, Muhammad married Aisha when she was a child. But to his credit, he waited 3 full years to consummate the marriage, when she was also a child. He used to walk around making it very clear that his little wife was his favorite person. There are plenty of hadith about how he used to be playful with her, how they used to run after each other, and how he would always talk about her. It would be very cute if it wasn't for the age difference, if it wasn't for the fact that she was a child, and if it wasn't for, what was the third reason? Oh yeah, that he had other wives. How's it fair to them if he makes it crystal clear that he doesn't love them as much as he loves her? They can only share her leftovers, so to speak. And that's not even the worst part. Those are a dozen or so women. But the situation we're going to talk about today affects countless Muslim women since then because Muhammad was involved, because Islam allows it. How Muhammad acted shows us his deficiency as a decent human being, let alone as a husband. Sawdah bin Zam'a was one of the Prophet's oldest wives. Sources say that she was around 50 to 55 years old when she married Muhammad, the 50-something-year-old. She's often described as tall, large, and generally unattractive. And we hear this narrative among apologists that Muhammad was such a noble man for collecting such old widows as wives. Don't forget, they're about the same age. Sources differ, of course, about what order Muhammad married his wives in, but according to Ibn Kathir, Muhammad knew that Aisha was too young to look after his household or children, which were older than her. He said, "She is too young." There goes the narrative that Aisha was a fully mature woman by the age of 6 or 9 or whatever. So Sawdah was suggested to him as some sort of wife babysitter. And you know what? If that was the arrangement in that context, if he married her because she needed support and he needed a babysitter for his wife and children, that's fine and understandable. But the precedent he set with her is the problem. Sawdah felt insecure about Muhammad's love for her and about her marriage. Why wouldn't she? She's having a midlife crisis while hubby's out with a fresh new thing. She was so insecure in her marriage that she did something heartbreaking. Did she cheat to raise her self-esteem? Did she poison his favorite wife? No. She went to talk to her husband and beg him not to leave her. She conceded some of her rights to convince him to keep her. Here's what I would say to her in that situation. I would say, Sawdah, I am so sorry I behaved that way, in a way that made you feel insecure. I love you and I will always love you. And I'll make sure not to neglect you again, and I will do better. And then I'll talk to my other wives and figure out if they feel similarly. But that's not how Muhammad handled the situation. He allowed her to sacrifice her night with him to the girl that captivated her husband's attention. Can you imagine giving up your time with your partner to the person who he prefers over you? How humiliating is that? And it gets worse. Muhammad then standardized it in the Quran. I mean, Allah standardized it in the Quran. Going forward, a woman who fears neglect or ill conduct from her husband is allowed to give up some of her rights to remain married. Notice the phrasing of this, the audacity of this religion. There is no blame on either of them if they seek fair settlement. What the is there to settle? The guy is being a bad husband and an unempathetic human being. He needs to be the one paying for it somehow, not her. This isn't a shared problem, especially when the woman is the one who's sacrificing further to resolve the problem. The woman who already has no say in whether she's the only wife or not. Something to note here is the word nushuz. Apologists claim that nushuz is a horrible thing when a woman does it, like cheating and hurting the partner and so on, but only in the context of allowing a man to beat his wife. Here, it means something else. Subhanallah, the miracle of linguistic reinterpretation. Nushuz for a woman means not fulfilling her marital duties, which literally include obeying her husband and providing sex. Yeah, she's not supposed to refuse sex at all, unless she's sick or on her period or something. That's considered nushuz. For men, it means ill conduct and neglect, and yet still, it's the woman who has to sacrifice. And what's the reason for this neglect? Because the wife is getting too old or too ugly. For context, this man is in his 50s, lusting after a child, and we're supposed to empathize with him for losing interest in his age-appropriate wife? Say it with me, everybody. Islam gave women rights, and then took them away if she's too old or ugly.
Gotcha, bitch!
Ironically, this verse is in Surah An-Nisa, which means the chapter of women. The surah that allows enslaving women, beating them, and addresses them through their men. This tells you a lot about the topic of women in Islam. Say it with me, everybody. Islam gave women rights. Imagine this scenario. A father has 2 children and he clearly favors one of them. When the child says she fears being kicked out of the house and offers to give daddy her allowance money, the father accepts. How much of a terrible deadbeat dad is that? And the analogy fits so well because not only is one of the wives a literal child, but women are infantilized in Islam. A husband can beat them if they disobey. Apologists like to soften the blow and say men are providers of women, not only dominant over them, but who needs to be provided for except someone who's inferior to you or a child? A husband can beat his women if they disobey. He can prevent them from having their siblings over and beat them if they disobey. He's financially responsible for them, which is often presented as some kind of luxury or right that Muslim women have, except when you realize that it makes the women at their husband's mercy. And this is the money that she gets for living expenses and such. Is it really hers? And is it hers if she has to give it back or some of it back to not get kicked out of the house because her husband found a new little wife? Oh, to be one of the Prophet's wives. Daddy husband, can I have my brother over? No. Daddy husband, can I leave the house? No. Daddy husband, please don't leave me. Okay, but I'm gonna go sleep with my younger, hotter wife now. Don't forget, you get some fruits in heaven or torture in hell. What's even worse is that the Prophet said his wives are not allowed to remarry even after his death. So what choice did poor Sawdah have except to think of herself as a lesser woman? And it's very obvious the level of brainwashing done by the cult leader to his harem. She believed that she was ordered by Muhammad and Allah to stay in the house as a good woman should. So she stayed in the house for 44 years till she died. 44 years. I'm so sorry, Sawdah, that this is how you had to spend your life. And I will do my best to reduce the likelihood of this happening to more women in the future under the authority of religion. So by all real-world standards, any man doing any of this in any context aside from being a prophet would be considered a piece of shit. And what many believers fail to realize is that this is how cult leaders have always behaved, and they always claim that God told them to marry multiple women or marry this specific woman in their dreams. So what makes Muhammad so special? To wrap up today's episode, what have we learned? If your wife feels neglected, say, sure, I won't kick you to the curb, but what's in it for me? Remember that anniversary gift I gave you? I'd like that back, please. And if you're a woman and you feel neglected by your husband, you should go humiliate yourself further by asking him to spend more time with the younger, hotter replacement, or else you might be left penniless and on the street. Those are today's lessons. Say it with me, everybody. Islam gave women rights. Stay tuned because in the next episode, we will learn from Muhammad how to handle situations involving domestic abuse. And it's not merely about verse 434. There is so much more to deep dive into. For example, I didn't have time to dig into Ibn Kathir's Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya in Arabic, so I relied on the easily searchable information from the English translation. If you would like to support me so that I have more time and space to continue researching and learning, you'll find the links in the description below. So when you're assessing the Prophet's character and judgment and assessing whether he's the beacon of morality or not, I want you to think critically and think for yourself. Say it with me, everybody. Islam gave women rights. Islam gave women rights. Islam gave women rights.